Hi, I'm Ara, N6ARA, and welcome to a special episode about a product that a friend of mine, Mike K6STR, approached me about. Now, Mike had been developing and designing his own 2-meter bandpass filter after experiencing a lot of issues near Mount Wilson in Los Angeles. For those unfamiliar with Mount Wilson, it's filled with a bunch of radio towers, and the RF noise at Mount Wilson was so loud that it actually caused his radio to go deaf. And so he thought, I can design my own little filter to filter out broadcast AM and anything else that's transmitting up there and only pass through the 2-meter band. Mike had been tinkering with the idea and building a bunch of different variants to see how he could get the insertion loss down while still being an effective filter. He went through a few design iterations. This was one of the first that happened to perform the best. He also played around with a couple of different parts to see if he could get the insertion loss down, but eventually found that the size of the filter actually grows quite a bit with that. So it's all sort of a balance, right? Anyway, after playing around with the idea, he approached me and asked, hey, would you like to turn this into a product and sell it on your store? And I immediately said yes, because 2-meter filters are super important, especially for summits on the air near radio stations. And while there are a lot of products out there that can do 2-meter filtering, nothing is quite as small and capable of handling as much power as Mike's designs. The thing is, going from a prototype to a product is quite a bit of work. You really have to think through your component selection, manufacturability, and how to bring down the cost of all the parts without compromising the design too much. And that's where I came in to help. Over the past few weeks, I've been iterating on the design and working with Mike to figure out ways to make it more manufacturable. My first attempt at it was to shrink the packaging. Essentially, I brought a lot of the components a lot closer together, and we ended up changing some of the variable capacitors to be easier to tune, and got a smaller design to work pretty dang well. That said, there were a few things that we think we might be able to improve upon on even this design here. And that includes rotating the inductors here so that they don't couple together. Originally, these inductors were lined up in parallel, and that meant that the fields of one inductor could actually leak into the other. And so by turning the center inductor by 90 degrees, we figured, oh, that would actually kind of decouple them and perhaps improve the performance. I haven't built this design yet. In fact, that's what we're going to be doing today. And we'll be testing it out and seeing how close this is to being ready for production. I'm going to build one for myself. My buddy Mark KD7DTS is also going to get one of these, and we're going to take it up to a mountain that's in a challenging RF environment, and we're going to put it to the test. All right, and so this is the Rev B model of the TinyFilter. There's a nice label here now for it, and a field for a serial number, because each one of these is actually going to have to be soldered and then tuned, and we want to make sure we track which serial numbers get tuned so that we don't end up accidentally shipping one that isn't tuned and ready to go. So what I'm going to do now, instead of soldering these components on by hand with a solder iron, I'm instead going to use a stencil that has all the holes to essentially let solder paste go through to the board exactly to where the pads are for all the components I want to put on here. And the reason I'm doing that is because, well, one, some of these pads are so small that you can't really even get a solder iron in them. So it just makes more sense to use solder paste. Essentially put the paste on this and then place all the components, and then we'll put it in a reflow oven and reflow it, and all the solder should melt. And then we could put the connectors that are customizable, which, by the way, a big ask from a lot of people who have wanted a better 2-meter filter is customizability on what kind of connector you want on each end. And so the thinking here is, if I'm going to offer this as a product, that the board would arrive with all the small components pre-assembled, so you'd get pretty much this but without the connectors, and then while you're checking out in the store, you could choose which connectors you want to buy and assemble. So that way you can build this to whatever radio and antenna system you're trying to put it into. All right, with that said, let's get the soldering going. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up just roughly here. Now, this setup is definitely not meant for production. This is more for a prototype. So I'm just going to lay the board and then line up the solder mask like that. It's gonna bow a little bit. Oh, actually, it's gonna bow. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna shim it with a few other boards. There we go. This TinyFilter now has a bunch of friends who will help. Happy filter. There we go. Nice. Then tape that down. Then tape that down. Cool. So I'm not going to lift this up because everything will shift, but everything here should look silver because only the pads for the components that I'm about to place here are exposed. But before I get those components on there, I got to get the solder paste on. All right. So this is some leadless solder paste that I have that's been left over from a previous production run. What I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze out a little bit. We really don't need a whole lot. Then we can use this solder paste spreader to get the solder paste across. Worked the first time. Scoop up the little bits that have been left over. And now, sweet. Now our board has all the solder that needs to be where it needs to be. And now what I'll do, and I'll move these out of the way, is start placing the components. All right, let's put this in the oven. Glow time. All right, so for this build in particular, I'm going to build mine using SMAs, but Mark requested BNC connectors. So we're going to put BNCs on Mark's filter. Okay. So I just finished soldering this, but realized that the PCB board that hosts these two connectors is going to kind of flex a little bit, and we may end up cracking solder joints or vias. And really, to make this thing a little more structural, we can actually sandwich on top another one of the PCBs that's not electrically connected and just acts as like a mechanical structure for the filter, and it actually looks a lot better with it. The one thing though that we got to do here, and this is kind of a hack, is we got to tune these capacitors and tune this circuit before we put this on, because once I put this on, those variable capacitors are not going to be visible. So I think in future designs I can poke some holes in this in a separate board that'll be a cover that'll allow you to get a tool in there to tune it. But at least for now, because we just got to get this thing tested, we can at least put this on, tune it, put this on, take it out to the mountain and see how it does. So let's do that. Is this the right tool? This is the right tool. All right, so marker 1 is our center frequency, and marker 2 and 3 here are going to be our roughly 3 dB roll-offs. So I don't really have an exact algorithm for how to tune this quite yet, so I'm going to start with the middle one and kind of play around with the outer variable capacitors first. So I'm now tuning the 3 variable capacitors in an attempt to get our center frequency of this bandpass filter, which is comprised of 3 LC pairs, impedance match pairs, such that the center frequency has the least amount of insertion loss, and we have decent roll-off on the sides of the bandpass. So you can see marker 1 is set to 146.580, which is the calling frequency for summits on the air, and the mountain calling frequency. I found that these filters are roughly 10 megahertz in bandwidth, or maybe a little bit over that. And so I've put the markers here the marker 2 and 3 to show roughly how much the 10 megahertz offset above the calling frequency and below is attenuating. And obviously everything else above and below it is way, way down there. I mean, we're talking, I don't know, that looks to be about 60 dB of attenuation outside of that, but this filter is looking really, really good. I'm just kind of tweaking it until I can get the least amount of insertion loss, because every little bit I feel like helps. And I can get it to about 3 dB of total attenuation, which means if you put 5 watts in, you get 2.5 out, and that's about the best you could do for a small form factor like this. And so you could see here, this center variable capacitor, if I really turn it, and because I'm doing a bunch of small movements here, I can really shift this waveform around by messing with it. The filter's performance can significantly change if these values are completely off. So it's a matter of sort of playing with one variable, one of the variable capacitors, then moving on to the other and sort of jumping back and forth until you're happy with the overall bandpass filter. All right, so based on these measurements, it looks like we have about our 3 dB roll off for this 2 meter filter. The bandwidth is looks to be like roughly 12 megahertz or so. That's pretty good. In general, I can get it down to about 10, so I'll probably keep tweaking this, but this is perfectly usable enough. You sort of can tune around, and at some point it becomes diminishing returns. You can't really do much more. So this looks great. This thing's ready to get on the air. I'm going to now install the cap to this and take it up to the summit. There we go. Structural PCB. It's a feature. All right. It's looking great. All that's left to do now is take it out into the field. Oh yeah, that is so sturdy. Cool. Good morning. Today we're going to be testing the TinyFilter with Mark KD7DTS, and I'm excited because we've built a few of these and brought them to what is arguably one of the most RF challenging environments. Today we're hiking up San Gabriel Peak, right next to Mount Wilson. As I was saying, Mount Wilson is actually one of the most RF challenging environments because there are megawatt stations right next to us, and that tends to desensitize the front end of the radio, right? This is where the challenges for Mike K6STR actually began. He was on another summit just across from here, about a mile and a half out, called Mount Lawler. And that's where he was experiencing these problems with his radio essentially getting desensitized and not being able to hear other stations calling him. And that's what inspired him to design this filter. So I figured, what better place to test it than here? We got about another 1,000 feet of gain to go, but it is a gorgeous and beautiful day. There's nothing quite as nice as testing field gear because it means you get to test it in the field. Oh man, summit! Woo! I'm so tired. Definitely worth it for the view. Look at this. You can see little airplanes even like rowing up to land at LAX. That's downtown LA.
Hey, Ari, you know what's way more interesting than airplanes?
Radios?
Look over there.
Oh no, our nemesis, Mount Wilson. That's a lot of megawatts. Do you think we'll pick it up? All right, Mark. What radios did you bring with you today?
I brought all of the radios.
Oh I can't believe you brought this many handhelds.
Okay, so we have my new favorite radio, the Baofeng Mini.
Nice.
With
stock antenna.
My new favoriter radio, the Baofeng Mini, with the N6 ARA TinyFilter serial number 001.
Oh yeah.
So we're gonna do the A/B test. Identical radios bought at the same time. How do they receive with the stock antenna and with the enhanced system? Okay, and we can do the same test with and without the filter in line. Okay, so that's one set of tests. Then everybody always asks, but how does it work with a good radio? I know that my Yaesu FT5DR is a very good radio, but I also know it's deaf as a doornail next to Mount Wilson, so we're gonna test that and then see if we can fix it with the filter. And then I've also had people tell me, you should really get into DMR, but the cheap DMR radios from Anytone, they're not gonna work in a high RF environment. Is that true? We're gonna find out. And then I have the new Beta 6 of the NR7Y firmware for my CW Quanshang over here. We're gonna test that one out too because it is notorious for going deaf in a high RF environment. Let's get to work, Ara. Let's test some radios.
Dude, this is exciting. Radios, filter, really, really noisy RF. Let's do the thing. All right, let's give the audience what they want first. Baofeng test.
Baofeng test. This is a stock Baofeng UV5R Mini, stock antenna, stock everything. And this is the K6STR N6 ARA TinyFilter enhanced Baofeng Mini. I've set the volume the same, everything should be the same. They're both on 14658, set on high power, and you're not gonna be able to see that in the sun, but just trust me, it's true. I'm going to try transmitting on this terrible little rubber duck that it comes with, and then we'll see which one can hear the chasers come back. CQ Soda, CQ Soda. This is Kilo Delta 7 Delta Tango Sierra. Is there anybody on frequency?
Sure is. November Tango 6 Echo.
November Tango 6 Echo. This is Kilo Delta 7 Delta Tango Sierra. How are you doing, John?
Good morning. It's strong here, 5'9".
5'9", really? That's pretty impressive. You sound 5'9" as well on one of the two radios I'm testing.
What are you testing? Something weird?
Yes, I am testing something weird. I'm testing two identical Baofeng UV5R Minis, but with two very different antenna systems.
Okay, that last transmission, very, very clear. Audio sounds better. The other one, slight noise in the background and a little bit more muffled audio.
Okay, now, well, one thing I just noticed is
Better antenna.
better antenna.
So what we're gonna do is we're going to take the filter out and test the exact same antenna, but we won't be able to hear John respond.
Perfect.
NT6E, could I get one more check on a different configuration? One more check on this configuration? And we lost him.
And we lost it.
So the Baofeng UV5R Mini, regardless of antenna, does not work if you are next to Mount Wilson. If you add the filter, it does, and it doesn't get fixed by the antenna. It is worth noting the stock antenna that comes with the Baofeng UV5R Mini, the correct response to this antenna is you take it off and then you throw it into the bushes and then immediately go get it because we don't litter. We don't litter. We don't litter here. But these are terrible. Throw them away immediately. All right, I'm going to call you, and then I need you to send a very long explanation back. I don't know, tell me about breakfast or something, all right? NT6E, this is Kilo Delta 7 Delta Tango Sierra. I'm gonna do a configuration test. Please give me a long response.
Okay, I don't know how long I can give you a response.
Well, let's test it. Okay, nothing. Let's put it back on.
Oh, that could be summed up in like 2 seconds. Started out the morning with coffee. Of course, I
I feel so bad because we're not actually hearing what he's telling us.
No, I don't know what he's talking about. What I do know.
Cinnamon sugar Pop-Tart. How's that? I hope that's long enough.
That was literally perfect. Thank you, John, so much.
Oh my gosh, it totally works.
This filter is amazing. Let's keep testing it.
Okay, so I'm sure everybody in the audience is probably asking the same question, which is, well, did you test it with two identical radios, with two identical antennas, one with a filter and one without? And the answer is yes, we're about to. So you have a UV5R stock antenna, I have a UV5R stock antenna, and then a TinyFilter tuned for 2 meter.
CQ Soda, this is KD7DTS.
November Tango 6 Echo.
Whoop.
Zulu Sierra.
Oh no!
In T6E, I can hear you on one of the two radios. You are 5'9". Do you mind going up to 20 watts?
Okay, KD7DTS. This is NT6E. I got you 5'9", and I'm transmitting 5 watts and moving to 15 watts.
All right, real good. KD7DTS, how copy at this point, John?
Okay, you're still 5'9". I assume you're probably at the same power, fixed power. I'm at 15 watts now. 15 watts.
Very good. All right, can I get a signal report on this radio?
Still solid 5'9". 5'9" here.
All right, so didn't affect the signal strength on your end, and can you bump it to your maximum power?
Going to my max power, which is about 40 watts.
All right, and I can still only hear you on the radio with the filter. I think we've demonstrated that we could not have talked to you without having this filter.
Okay, well now I'm actually at 40 watts now, 40 watts.
Yeah, still nothing on the unfiltered Quanchang. So the unfiltered Quanchang, no dice, it loves filters up here.
Real good, especially in high RF environment. It's a big requirement now.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, high RF environment, big requirement. We
got a slogan.
All right, it works, Aura. Up top.
Woo!
Good job, you guys.
Thanks so much, John. Really appreciate you helping us out today. All right, gotta say that was pretty awesome. The TinyFilter totally works exactly just like how Mike K6STR designed it. He's done an amazing job with this design. And frankly, other than a few small design tweaks we want to make to the footprints of the pads on some of the parts, and designing a little shell to go over it to just make it more structurally rigid. Aside from that, this thing is pretty much ready for production. And I'm just super excited to get this out on the store soon. I
was really excited to have it in my hands today.
I know. It's the other thing worth mentioning, and in fact, these were tests you did and points you brought up. One, you actually put the TinyFilter on the Tiny SA. I don't make that product, but you were able to demonstrate. Actually, you want to tell them what you were able to demonstrate?
Yeah, so I took a 3-element Aero Yagi, pointed it at Mount Wilson because that's the direction to San Diego, and then connected that to a Tiny SA. And I took screenshots of it without the filter and with the filter. And without the filter, you can see just a mess on the screen, and it's really loud across the band, you know, from 100 megahertz on up. And then I threw the filter on and saw that you get more than 30 dB of attenuation for all of the interfering signals. And so you have this really nice quiet band to work in. And if you're seeing that on the Tiny SA, that's of course the same thing that you're going to see on your Quanchang.
Yep, yeah, exactly.
And that's why it works so well.
And I think the other thing, the point you brought up as we were hiking down, is that while the insertion loss of the TinyFilter it hurts your final power output, it does enable you to use a larger and higher gain antenna. So that loss you can actually make up for in antenna gain.
Right, so the classic solution on the peak we were on today is you take a bad stock rubber duck and then you lay your radio on the ground, because that's the only way to get rid of enough RF that you don't wipe out your front end. But of course, then your signal is terrible. And so you're both slightly deaf and you can't transmit that well because now you're using a bad rubber duck. But with the filter, we can use a good Yagi and point it wherever we need. And so we're picking up way more gain than we lost in power.
Man, yeah, I appreciate you so much for coming out and helping me test this. I had a blast. And for those curious, if you want to get your hands on one, I plan to create a placeholder product on the store that I'll link to in the description below. You can sign up there for notifications when the product is ready. At least at the time of this recording, I still need to do one more final revision, and then I can put that on the store once it's done. So if you want that product as soon as possible, if you want a TinyFilter as soon as possible, definitely sign up for those notifications because I have a hunch they're going to sell out very quickly. With that said, huge kudos and thanks to Mike K6STR for trusting me with turning this thing into a product. I'm super excited not only to use it myself, but to see the world get their hands on the TinyFilter. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and 7-3.
We should activate more stuff.
We really should. Also, I really want a sandwich right now.
I want a sandwich too.
Good.
I also want coffee.
Coffee? Oh yeah, I forgot to have coffee this morning.
That's tragic.
It is tragic.
You forget coffee.
I genuinely have no idea how I made it up this mountain.
I think with the power of dreams and hope.
Hey, what's in this tunnel, Mark? Here we see the Mark running back to the camera to go pick it up. This is what we call breaking the fourth wall.